Tonight's Planning Commission to order, and we'll start with approving the agenda and the minutes from last month.
I did have one correction to note. I believe you abstained in the vote on item B when we were looking at the ordinance revisions, and that was what we brought to the county commissioners as well. So instead of 330-510, it would be 230 or 231-411. Just a minor correction. Otherwise, I would make a motion to approve the agenda and minutes.
Do we have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none. We'll start with new business. Dean Berglund, file 2025-1 IUP. Neva?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is a request for a renewal of an interim use permit for the firewood processing operation at 1334 Gunflint Trail in Grand Marais. The property is zoned FAR 3. Mr. Berglund is the property owner of the parcel. The agent for the application is David Howe, and he is the owner of the business, which is North Shore Timber LLC. So those are the different names and entities involved with this request. The applicant's property is 71 acres and has an unnamed public watercourse running through the property. It's entirely within the FAR 3 zone district, which lists a conditional use in that zone district for temporary chipping, debarking, and sawmill operations. There is a unnamed, as I mentioned, unnamed public watercourse. There we go. So North Shore Timber LLC, represented by Mr. Howe with the landowner, Mr. Berglund, are requesting renewal of the interim use permit that was issued in 2016 for firewood processing operations at the existing permitted gravel pit. The permit requests to allow processing, drying, and storing firewood. The applicants are requesting this interim use permit to be reissued for 10 years, during which time the renewal IUP would need to be reapplied for. This is a year-round operation with the kiln operating all year. The applicants clarify in the IUP application that cutting activities will only occur during regular business hours, Monday through Friday, from 8 to 5. The applicants have clarified that there will be no cutting activities on weekends, nights, or holidays. For zoning considerations, the principal purpose of this zone district is to provide for permanent and seasonal areas at medium density. Farming and other rural activities are also allowed. This application is being processed as an interim use permit. An interim use is a temporary use of a property until a particular date, until the occurrence of a particular event, or until zoning regulations no longer permit it. On page 6 of the packet, I listed out the requirements from the Cook County zoning ordinance that outline the standards for reviewing these types of permits. For background, the parcel is a longtime gravel pit owned by Mr. Berglund. In 2001, a conditional use permit was approved by the Board of Commissioners, which established the infrastructure for a wood chip processing facility. That operation was short-lived, and the focus on chipping gradually eroded. In 2013, Mr. Berglund had a CUP request for gravel crushing, formally removed from the wood chipping as a conditional use on the site. In 2016, Mr. Howe and Mr. Berglund requested an interim use permit to allow the firewood processing operation. At that time, the parcel was 80 acres and has been an active permitted gravel pit. The firewood processing is a cooperative arrangement. The description of the operation is included in the staff report, which I'll read here as well. The firewood processing operation involves the stockpiling of bolt-length birch and maple, the bucking to wood stove lengths, followed by desiccation in a wood-fired kiln. Operation of the kiln extends beyond a 12-hour period. The operation has been in place at Isaac Hansen for several years. Keep in mind that this was written in 2016. During that time, the Planning and Zoning Office received several calls about the noise from the kiln, and they constructed a series of exhaust baffles that effectively removed impacts from the adjacent residences. The Berglund pit is situated within a landscape more conducive to commercial type operations than those experienced in Lutsen. The nearest residence in 2016 at least was over 1,000 feet away, with a marked contrast to where it was in Lutsen at the time. For conditions of approval in the 2016 permit, there were 4. The first condition was that it was a 5-year interim use permit, which expired in 2021. The baffles were to remain on the exhaust system while the kiln was operating. The permit was only for the preparation, storage, and delivery of firewood. And upon sale or transfer of the property, the new owners would have 60 days to reapply for a new IUP. Due to staff turnover in 2021, the former planning and zoning administrator retired, and I was being brought on board, coincided with the same time with this IUP retiring in its effectiveness. So our office missed that 5-year deadline ending, and we failed to notify the applicant the need to reapply. So this came to my attention, frankly, when it was Mr. Berglund's annual gravel pit renewal. And so I reached out to him, and him and Mr. Howe were extremely responsive in getting this new permit application up and running. For site conditions and considerations, the lot is well vegetated with existing wetlands, and the open area is within lot coverage allowances, as well as the open gravel pit area. For wetlands, the site has a stream flowing through it with wetlands. The site has been developed to avoid impacts to wetlands, and the gravel pit is reviewed annually for compliance with the conditions of approval. The access driveway crosses wetlands. The operators should note to be cautious of unintentional wetland impacts during the growing season and consult with the county wetland specialist with any questions. For noise, written comments indicate that noise is generated from this use, causing complaints when occurring outside regular business hours. Staff conducted a site visit while 3 pieces of machinery were in operation, and a tractor with forklift with moving logs. The kiln was also running at that time. Although noise levels were noticeable, they did not require hearing protection for a bystander walking around the site. However, hearing protection is required and used by the equipment operators. Staff also drove on the neighboring roads and didn't observe any observable noise during those drives. Although the activity does generate noise, it doesn't appear to exceed the state noise pollution control standards. A condition could be placed that the property shall comply with the state noise pollution control standards outlined in Minnesota rules. For lighting, lighting has not been identified as an issue by adjacent property owners, but the Planning Commission could discuss if that's being used outside of those hours. There is safe access from the Gunflint Trail, and for other, I noted the residential properties. On the screen is a map to where I identified the neighboring residences that identified noise complaints with the operation. About 800 feet, I think, is the closest one to where the operation is located. We publicly noticed this in the Cook County News Herald. We mailed out 29 letters of notification to adjacent property owners, as well as county departments and the DNR hydrologist. We received the following written correspondence. Daniel and Rachel Berglund wrote in opposed to the request due to the noise from current operations occurring outside the typical working hours on weekends, holidays, and early morning and late evening. And then another letter that was jointly written by Bev Wolke, Jade and Max Albitz, and Virginia Berglund. They are on the Golf Course Road, and they would like discussion on the hours and days of operation. They consider that the operation be moved to Mr. Howe's property instead. And then the Cook County Soil and Water Conservation District provided a memo with details regarding invasive species associated with these trees and provided resources for the landowner to reference. I also provided draft consideration for facts and findings. For a conditional use permit, we review certain standards as outlined in the Cook County zoning ordinance. The first is that the use conforms to the land use or comprehensive plan of the county. In my staff narratives, I often will put in draft findings for your consideration that you're more than welcome to amend after we hold a public hearing and hear from the applicant after your discussion. So the draft findings at this time are the Cook County Land Use Guide Plan describes the Maple Hill East End as these areas have a history of productive agriculture, remain dotted with various types of agriculture enterprises. There's a commercial goal to provide commercial facilities to meet the needs of residents and visitors, which includes Policy 45, encourage farming, fishing, and logging enterprises, and a general land use goal to have an inventory of land suitable and appropriately located for the anticipated types of land uses compatible with natural resources and proximity to existing infrastructure to protect non-compatible land uses from one another, which includes policy number 11, potentially incompatible adjacent land uses shall be buffered from one another. Means to accomplish this may include open space, berming, plant material, building design, hours of operation, noise control, and other means. The second finding for a conditional use permit is that the use is compatible with the existing neighborhood. This use is located at an existing gravel pit and is located over 800 feet from residential uses. Hours of operation were not established in the 2016 permit. Establishing reasonable time restrictions should address noise concerns. Finding number 3, the use will not impede the normal and orderly development and improvement in the surrounding area of uses permitted by right in the zone district. This use is aligned for the purposes of the FAR 3 zone district. And number 4, the location and character of the proposed use is considered to be consistent with a desirable pattern for development in the area. The proposed use is consistent with the more rural activities of this area, and conditions can be established to address any concerns raised by residents. For staff recommendations for consideration, comment letters from neighboring property owners have raised concerns about noise occurring outside typical working hours. However, no specific operating hours were established in the 2016 conditions. In recent years, Land Services has not received any complaints about this operation, except following the public notice for this interim use permit being sent to adjacent property owners. Staff recommend the Planning Commission consider a shorter interim use permit renewal period than the 10-year proposed by the applicant to provide a period of time to evaluate how the new time restrictions address noise complaints. I'll take this moment to add that Mr. Howe is unable to join us today. He is stuck in a driveway in a remote area of the county. I did speak with him before he got stuck in his truck, and he said that he would be fine with a 5-year interim use period of renewal for your consideration. He would have added that if he was here in person. I provided some draft findings for your consideration as well that incorporates the 2016 permit conditions, as well as some additional ones to talk about the noise, the hours of operation, and to clarify that renewal period. And that's what I have, Mr. Chair. And then Mr. Berglund is here to represent the application.
All right. Mr. Berglund, would you like to add anything to the narrative?
No, I'm pretty good with everything. I like him there. It's, it generates some income for me. He does a good job. He's a hard worker. If he ever fails, it won't be for lack of trying. I'd like him to be there. I do believe there's some constraints, and I put some on him already. But, I heard from the neighbors. One of the neighbors that you saw out there is my own brother. And one of the other neighbors is my stepmother, Ginger Berglund. And, Bev and, they're my steps. And so, but I told all them. I said, if you got something to say, I said, now is the time. Now voice your opinion. I was surprised to see my brother say he wanted operations to stop because he hasn't conveyed that to me. But they do want some constraints, and I fully understand. When they're telling me that Dave was up there cutting wood at 9 o'clock on a Sunday in the summer, yep, that's overboard. Coming in at 4 or 5 in the morning, if it's summer and it's light and starting to cut, yeah, no, that's overboard. And so some good, time structure, but time that lets him operate his business, I think that's appropriate. And one thing I've kind of had to laugh over time, I've told people this, I go, we all deal with noise. I don't care who you are. We've got some neighbor, somebody's doing this. I live on Devil's Track Lake, and I'm surrounded with retirees. Down one end to the other, and in the summer, all my neighbors are so busy being retired that there's only one time they can mow their lawns, and that's Sunday morning or Sunday afternoon when I have that one day to rest. So we all deal with it, and I've talked to all the people around the neighborhood about this too, and they all agree. But the chainsaw does need to be restricted, and I'm good with that. And the dry kiln, I never hear it make any noise. It's just, you could stand 200 feet away and you're not going to hear it. It's whatever it was before, it's changed. So he's doing a pretty good job, but he said, he wouldn't do any chainsawing on the weekends. So I think we're, pretty much in a line with what'll make it successful.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Anyone else from the public wish to speak on this application? Hearing none, we'll close it to the public and discuss it as a board. Start on my right. You guys, Sheila?
Yeah, I think it's fine. It sounds like if you put those hours in place, it will make the neighbors happy.
Mr. Berglund, you had said that you had put a couple restrictions on him in the past. Was he fairly compliant with those restrictions? And
We might have veered to the left once or twice, but I cracked him down again. I mean, it was just, I had never known there was a problem. Then all of a sudden, I think we were at some gathering, and my brother, 2 or 3 other neighbors were like, they all just confronted me. And I was like, well, why didn't you tell me this sooner? I would have done something about it. And so I did the very next day. But I suppose all of a sudden, maybe he was in a panic or he needed to get something done. But it's like the discussion I've had with him since we renewed this application and stuff. I said, it's yours to lose. I said, if you don't comply, I said, you're just going to lose it, and then you're out. And that's how it's going to be. So I said, if you want to be here, you want to be here for 5 years, 10 years, what have you, I said, it's all going to be in your court. So I think he's pretty well dialed in, and he does have one little small part where he can go do some work over by Hedstrom's, but that's just this one little spot, and they won't give him any more. So he needs this, and you had said in your thing, my brother had said, well, why doesn't he go and do it at his own property? He did apply to do it on his own property, which is right on the Gunflint Trail, that big A-frame, as just before you get to Hedstrom's, but it's almost all wetlands, so he got shot down instantly. Otherwise, he would have been there. So, but no, I don't think you have anything to worry about
With the
in the
hours.
future. I mean, I think he gets it now. And he wasn't like a huge violator. He was just not really understanding that neighbors were listening, and he's just this hard worker.
What were
So-
the restraints that you put on him?
Well, I just said
Hours?
you're going to go with the times that are set forth by this board, and that's just how it's going to be. I mean, he'll come in maybe at 5 in the morning, he might pile wood, but, nobody's listening to that, or he might load his pickup for a 7, 8 in the morning delivery. But I mean, who cares about that? That's nothing. And then you were mentioning lighting. There is no lighting there. The only lighting in the place is just in the building itself. And I don't see anything anymore. I don't see anything happening with lighting. And the only one that would ever see that, and the only person, is my brother. And he's got some pretty good lights of his own up at his house. So,
Pretty straightforward to me. Staff recommendations seem pretty sound. I think the 5 year is a good limit. Even would entertain the 3, because we've got this compliance question that seems to be manageable. They seem to have his attention, but, it would give us the opportunity to snap the chalk line again if we got the same complaint.
Yeah, non-problematic to me. I think codifying the hours in the conditions is what we need to do, and that gives us some enforcement ability.
Yep, I agree. No operating machinery during those hours.
I'm a strong supporter of the hours, because when Mr. Howe started his operation adjacent to my property, we had chain signs 7 days a week, 12 to 14 hours a day. So, yeah, we need, I think for the neighbor's perspective, the hours are the most important part for, especially chainsaw operation.
I think 5 years, it would be my thought on it. Allows him a little longer time frame if he wants to invest in upgrade equipment and stuff, a little more time for that, but definitely, it sounds like he was in favor of the timeline, and so I think look to entertain a motion.
I'd move for approval with the the time restrictions and the 5 year.
All the rest of the conditions?
Yes,
also?
yes, with the
Proposed
baffles.
conditions.
Yeah,
No weekends, no nights, no holidays.
correct.
So we've got a motion, do we have a second?
I will second that motion.
Any more discussion? Call for a vote, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none.
This will be at the commissioners at their next action meeting.
okay, thank you. All right, thank you all. Have a great day.
For a motion to adjourn the planning commission.
So
I'll make a motion.
I'll second that.
Motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Planning commission is adjourned. We're going to take a short break for the feeds to get changed, and then we'll start the Board of Adjustment.